wasn't the right tempo last week, and it's still not the right tempo this week. It goes like this.
Their critics say they are without doubt the worst rock and roll band to ever play on the internet, and perhaps anywhere else. One referred to them as the furry Palo Alto geeks, which they took as a compliment.
Island water free, you could see 1,000 places, safe inside a dream. You could wear...
Their major claim to fame is that they went on as the opening group for the Rolling Stones when the Stones performed their first internet concert. This was quite a surprise for the Stones, who hadn't actually given them permission to do that. Their lead guitarist, Russ Haynes, is currently experimenting with computerized 3D images. When he's not playing bass, Mark Manasse is renowned as the mathematician who recently discovered the world's largest prime number. On vocals, Steve Rubin is a major force in computer graphics at Apple Computers, and the drummer, Mark Weiser, may be the world's leading authority on something called ubiquitous computing, which he predicts will one day make computers as ordinary and as plentiful as light bulbs. They call themselves Severe Tire Damage, and they appear every Wednesday night on a side street to the internet called the M-Bone. Everybody, it seems, is finding a way of using the internet. Crestwood, in the heart of rural Kentucky, is probably not the type of place you'd expect to find internet pioneers. But in fact, that is part of the wonder of it all. For on the internet, nobody knows you from Crestwood, unless you tell them. The Petrie family of Crestwood may not strike you as pioneers, but pioneers they are. Pioneers in cyberspace. For they were among the first in the world to publish a family homepage, an internet postcard telling us who they are and where they live. By creating an address in cyberspace, Michelle Petrie not only staked a family claim on the internet, she invited the world to come visit.
This gentleman from Georgia, who, when I had posted the homepage on Netizens, I had said Crestwood, Kentucky, and he had written to me and he said, "Wow, Crestwood on the net." I had lived here 20 years ago when Crestwood was primarily a farming community. He was just absolutely amazed that it was in the electronic age. And we had a really nice exchange. I said, this is how the town has grown. This is what's happened to it. It's still a beautiful farming community. It still has a lot of its character that I'm sure it had when you had been here. But we're here. We're in the information age.
The Petrie family homepage welcomes us into their digital living room. Shows us pictures of and by the kids, tells us about the town, gives us the local weather, shares some of the family's favorite internet locations or sites. All you have to do is click on the highlighted words, the hypertext links, and from anywhere on the planet, as long as you're using the internet, you can drop in on the Petries. And the Petries, in return, can drop in on you. Even if you're going to school at Yamanashi Elementary in Kofu, Japan. The children here also have a connection to the internet. It's part of their curriculum. On their homepage, they put up information about their school, their daily lives, their hobbies. Japan and Kentucky, as part of the internet world, are now connected with the simple click of a mouse.
We looked up Japan and looked for an elementary school. The page was written in Japanese, and our browser all the characters were uninterpretable, but there was one English section at the end of the page, and it was an email address. And I said, okay, I don't even know if they know English, but let's write. And I did. I wrote to the person, ended up connecting with the head internet teacher, Matoki-san, at Yamanashi Elementary School.
So all of a sudden, Matoki-san, the head internet teacher, that's right, the head internet teacher, had a connection in Kentucky and could take the children of Yamanashi Elementary on weekly field trips to Crestwood without leaving their school in Kofu, to the delight of almost everyone. And Matoki-san could also find time to help 10-year-old Yuko Haraguchi write email messages to her new pen pal, 9-year-old Megan Petrie, in Crestwood.
And next time you go in on that bookmark, you'll see it.
I know this one's Sayonara.
Although they have only met over the internet, Matoki-san and the Petrie family have already developed some lasting ties.
The first thing he did was send us a wonderful message with a chess move for my son. And that started, because we had written in there that Douglas's interest had been chess. And that started email chess. And it's still going on. The game is still continuing.
It takes D4.
What's really remarkable here isn't that Douglas Petrie of Crestwood, Kentucky, is playing chess with a Japanese schoolteacher half a world away. What's remarkable is that Douglas thinks nothing of it. The concept of pointing and clicking his way across continents is as normal to him as answering the telephone or watching television. Douglas Petrie is able to do all this because of a brilliantly conceived piece of computer science and vision known as the World Wide Web. It's the web that's been sweeping the internet community into an entirely new dimension in communications. It was created by a young Englishman, Tim Berners-Lee. What Henry Ford is to the automobile, Tim Berners-Lee is to the internet, for he's the one who made it accessible. He simply looked at the net in a way that hadn't been done before, and he set in place a whole new universe, different from the internet, the World Wide Web.
The difference between the internet and the web. The net is made of cables and computers. Little computers that route packets, and big computers that soak them up, send them out. When you explore the net, you find computers. The web is an abstract universe of information. The important thing about the web is that you don't see computers and networks. So when you explore the web, you find documents, pictures, sound. You find people, hopefully. We hope to be able to have videos of people and telephone conversations with people on the web. You're exploring an abstract space, which is just what the authors of the web have made it.
It was in 1989, while working at CERN, the Advanced Particle Physics Lab in Geneva, that Tim Berners-Lee first came up with a concept for the World Wide Web. But CERN wasn't in the business of finding new ways to explore the internet, and actually shelved his proposal for a year. When he reapplied for funding, Berners-Lee told them this might be an easy way to make the internal phone directory available on their computer network. This time it sneaked through the bureaucracy, and by 1991, the World Wide Web was up and running. The rest is computer history.
In 1992, I looked back at the logs and found that that month it had been used 10 times as much as it had been used a year ago. And every month I looked at the logs for the next 4 years, they were exactly 10 times the rate. So it was an exponential curve, a complete exponential curve, that the more people read about the web on that server, the more they implemented clients and servers, the more the web grew.
The web is now growing even faster than the internet itself, and the internet's growth is simply phenomenal. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, for example, where 25,000 students and faculty share a network of 13,000 computers, they still have to pay for cable television, but internet connections are installed free in every student dorm. It all adds up to the largest explosion in communications we have ever known. There are now 40 million people on the net, and it continues to double in size every 10 months, which means that 1 million new people will sign on this week, and 1 million next week, and more than 1 million the week after that.
Next year, when it's grown by another factor of 10, it's very easy to And I say, oh, well, no, nothing's changed. We have the same growth rate. And in a way, nobody can grasp the very big numbers. The time when it hits you is when you realize that the person in front of you in the line for the bus is talking about their website.
The internet and the World Wide Web have become a part of daily life here. They use it for class assignments, for research, academic projects, storing information, or just for reading the newspapers. They send love letters and memos and insults to each other, and of course, they email home for money. At MIT, they will send or receive about 100,000 email messages a day. That's over 3 million a month. So it's hardly surprising that network manager Jeff Schiller has fallen just a bit behind in his reading.
Yeah, we call this a geological filing system. You're catching me at the tail end. Usually once every 2 years, I sort of in bulk go through it all and figure out what to do with it. We can actually see quite a bit.
Jeff Schiller's life at MIT is a constant monitoring of his network, tracing where computer traffic goes and where it comes from.
Oh, there we go. There's a traffic spike. Somebody's doing something. And
the university's network is almost a microcosm of the internet itself, interconnecting various computers in one large communication system. But if, for example, MIT used different technical standards from other internet users, it would defeat the entire concept. They couldn't communicate with the rest of the world. For the internet to survive, there has to be agreement on basic technical data. And that's one of the reasons Jeff Schiller comes here, to the Internet Engineering Task Force, meeting in San Jose, California. These are the people who make it their business to keep the internet running.
I mean, the internet is a community, and the IETF is a community. And we feel that the best way to ensure that the proper longevity of that is to contribute and do what we can to ensure that we move forward. You might say it's a labor of love among the people who are really into it.
Not so long ago, they could hold these meetings in a nearby coffee shop. Now over 1,000 volunteers show up 3 or 4 times a year to try and keep up with the technical standards which will keep the information flowing across the net. To become a member of the task force, you simply show up at one of their sessions and volunteer.
The answer is, it depends on what we see with deployment. In the meantime, I think we should be prepared to develop the technology wherever it makes half a sense to do that.
The internet has no absolute governing body, no real corporate or government structure. There's no one general manager, no one overriding authority. The task force simply agrees to agree and hopes that most people will share their concern for the long-term survival of the net when they leave these meetings and go back to their jobs. As well as running MIT's network, Jeff Schiller is also area head for security for the engineering task force. In 1988, when someone set up a computer virus called the Internet Worm, which made the network inoperable, it was Schiller who led the search to track the perpetrators down. He specializes in catching the bad guys.
We call them bad guys, so it's kind of a simple way of describing them. Are basically people who are violating the law of at least one nation, are certainly violating ethics. I mean, somebody using my computer against my wishes is certainly one of the bad guys. Now, it turns out it may not be illegal in my jurisdiction, depending on where I am, or it may not be illegal in the jurisdiction they're in. But to us, they're bad guys. Somebody using my computer, my resources, somebody stealing my information, my programs, without my consent. Those are the bad guys.
The larger the internet grows, the bigger the target it becomes. There are some people out there who'd like nothing more than to bring down the entire system, just to see if it could be done. The big question, of course, is can they actually do it?
Let me give you an interesting answer, because the answer is both yes and no. The answer is yes, the infrastructure of the internet is very vulnerable today. Anybody who's sufficiently clever could bring the entire internet to its knees. That's the yes part of the answer. The no part of the answer is consider the case in 1988 of the Internet Worm, which was a fairly incapacitating kind of problem when it came out. Within 48 hours, we took care of it. Because as much as there may be clever people who are bad guys out there, there are a lot more clever people who are not. And if you attack the network, you're attacking these people. And there will be a tremendous amount of collaboration. When we had the Internet Worm, we had an open telephone line between here and Purdue and Berkeley, literally all night. We had well-motivated students All right? Very bright students working on figuring out this thing and trying to solve it. If somebody figured out a way of bringing down the internet, there would be a tremendous collaborative effort to figure out what they did, how to undo it. And my prediction would be that within 5 hours, the internet would be back up in operation, and a lot of people would be looking for whoever did it. And I'd hate to be that person.
Schiller is one of the experts the police call on for help when networks are broken into. He specializes in throwing some light onto the murky world of computer crime.
How concerned you need to be about security sort of depends on the kind of computer you have, the kind of network access you have, and the information you're putting on the network. For example, if I'm running a small business and I have server computers that can be accessed remotely over the network, then I have to be concerned about security because in essence my business and my system is open to the bad guys. If I'm a consumer at home and I'm using a Macintosh or a Windows machine and I'm using a web browser, I don't have to be as concerned. My computer is not a server on the network. People cannot remotely come into your computer if what you're doing is running a web browser. You know, the users of things like CompuServe or Prodigy or America Online, they're not at risk that somebody's going to somehow break into their computer because they're using the network. What they have to be concerned about is the security of the businesses they interact with. For example, if you're going to purchase something over the network and you're going to put your credit card number, well, that credit card might be vulnerable in transit. Certainly, if you're going to use the network and you're going to give your credit card number to a business on the network, I'd always make sure I check my credit card bills.
Credit card theft is one area where the law is clear. Thieves can be prosecuted. But in other cases, even if the bad guys do get caught, it doesn't mean they'll automatically be charged with anything. For the internet is so new and so different that the legal process hasn't really caught up with it. The burglars who prowl your hard drive might never actually set foot in your neighborhood. In fact, they might not even be on the same continent.
We had people in Denmark who were using a stolen account on a international network provider to hop across the Atlantic to go into a service provider's office here in downtown Boston, make an outgoing telephone call, dial into MIT, and then once they dialed into MIT, using computers at MIT as a home base, again, a compromised account on a compromised system, to then break into computers at the National Weather Service. And from there, they were basically making trouble, and among other things, going back to Denmark, which was the first hint that maybe Denmark had something to do with it. And occasionally, we would intercept messages going back and forth to them, and once in a while, those messages were in Danish. That was another good hint.
The Denmark case, in which a small group allegedly tried to break into a U.S. government computer and have it spit out false information, is still before the courts, but the internet community is watching it closely because the issues it will raise will bring the internet and the law into territory where neither have been before. It's something they're thinking a lot about at Harvard Law School, where Professor Charles Nesson has been dubbed the Dean of Cyberspace.
Homepages saying that gambling will very soon be available on the internet, global casino and so forth. That's an amazing thing. Now, how can this be legal? The lawyer for the company, who, it's a publicly traded company, is saying this. The lawyer for the company frankly says, here's an example where technology is just out in front of regulation. They haven't caught up with us. Now, that's pretty interesting. We'll see whether this casino actually goes up and starts profiting.
It's been one of the tenets of the internet that there are in effect no laws, that it exists and flourishes across all international boundaries, and therefore no one country's legal system can possibly govern it. But the Dean of Cyberspace doesn't agree.
I don't think it's quite true that there's no law. In fact, some of the most interesting things that have been happening, at least in the U.S., have been regular old lawsuits that have been spawned by the net. For example, and they're very testing. For example, a couple in California operates a bulletin board on which they put allegedly obscene material, probably not obscene under California standards. A postal inspector in Tennessee downloads the material in Tennessee and prosecutes the people for obscenity, federal prosecution in Tennessee. stretching the jurisdictional notion, raising the question of whether anything, where did this offense take place? For example, did it take place in California? Did it take place in Tennessee? It's all electronic, so it's the snap of a light beam.
This is our modem room, and
The Tennessee case has the internet industry in an uproar. Basically, the courts there claimed that service providers were not simply carriers, like the phone companies, but should be defined more as publishers, responsible for whatever is contained on their systems. For people like Richard Pitt, who helps run Whimsy, one of Canada's oldest internet servers, the American court decision was a shocker.
it scared me. Quite honestly, as a service provider, it scared me. The last thing I want is, CSIS, the Canadian people, coming up to me and saying, we've got an extradition warrant here from the U.S. You're due to stand trial on obscenity charges in Tennessee. The way that things are today, it's possible that could happen, and it's scary.
Pitt doesn't deny there are sites for smut and pornography. He doesn't deny that there are people who might use the net to offend or challenge general sensibilities. What worries Pitt is that he might somehow be scooped up in the legal net if there's a blanket prosecution of internet service providers. It's this fear that has forced Pitt to check with the lawyers.
Basically, we have been told that we should try and treat our business as the telephone company has in theirs, where as a common carrier, if they come across something that is illegal, they have to do something about it. Specifically, we've been told that pornography in the form of bestiality and pedophilia are very much against the Canadian legal code, and that because we know that there are, for instance, internet news groups that deal specifically with those, we need to do something about that. So in fact, we have told our software, as well as we can, to not accept postings in those fields, in those particular topic areas.
But even when Pitt does censor questionable material, the few individuals who are posting it on the net can simply repost it on a different group and sneak it back into the system.
And there's not really anything that we can do about it, because unless we specifically go searching for it, we won't ever find it. And the amount of internet news, for instance, that goes through our system today is on the order of about 200 million characters per day, which translates to about 200,000 pages of typewritten text. Nobody can afford to look at all of that, and so we don't even try. Just as the telephone company couldn't possibly listen to every single conversation, so they don't try. But if we stumble across something, if somebody says there is something in this area that is particularly offensive and you should look at it, then we go and we look, and if it's something that shouldn't be there, we do take it out.
So Richard Pitt, internet service provider, has suddenly been forced into the role of reluctant censor. Not quite sure how the law will apply to the internet and to his business.
I mean, the internet has to grow up. Right now, there's still too much stuff where if I'm mad at you or you say something I don't like, I'll go to your service provider and say, cut you off, you're being bad. The funny thing is, if I make an obscene phone call from my house, you don't complain to the phone company to cut me off, you complain to police.
Anyone who's even on nodding terms with the internet recognizes that there are red light districts in cyberspace. There are undesirable neighborhoods springing up, neighborhoods where not everyone wishes to stroll. And that has raised fears in many quarters, that for children at least, the net is not as safe a community as it should be.
The first comment when I began to show this to the schools and some of the teachers, before they had even seen it, was the issue of safety. We can't let our, you can make bombs on the internet, you can do this on the internet. There's all these terrible places and all these potential perverts out there for people. And my feeling has been that we have got to guide our children. We've got to show them the way. We can't hold ourselves up and shield them forever. We have to help them make choices. We have to give them a reason for going out there, gathering information, and then we have to help them learn how to meaningfully respond.
Making the entire network safe for kiddies, okay, is wrong for two things. One is it will destroy the network because it will destroy its usefulness. Because as the global village, if we set the standard that any material offensive to anyone, anywhere on the planet, can't be on the network, well, very little stuff will wind up there. You know, you can name just about anything, and I'll bet you I can think of a scenario where somebody will be offended by it.
Keeping the net safe for kiddies is one thing. Making it available to others in society who might be intimidated by it is another issue altogether. For whatever reasons, many people have problems with the internet. They're scared of it. They have difficulty grasping the concept. But certainly not Rosaline Dixon of Ottawa.
It's like knitting. I remember when I discovered knitting, I just went into it like a madwoman and knitted. I mean, I was knitting sweaters, you know, I knitted for all my children, all my grandchildren. I just never stopped knitting, and then all of a sudden I figured, okay, I had done that. Now what'll I do next? And maybe Freenet filled that because I don't knit anymore. I had just lost my husband, and you're all of a sudden alone, and you've been a part of a pair, and suddenly you're half of a person, and so that other half of you have to do something interesting, and so everything that was going on that was interesting, I sort of at least explored.
Rosaline Dixon has recently retired from her job as a weekly newspaper editor in Ottawa. Her ambition now is to spend her time doing precisely what she wants.
This is just unbelievable, the special interest groups, the list of them.
She's on the net at least a couple of hours every day. She's even written a book about how to use it. There's certainly no internet intimidation here, for it would take a lot more than just the world's largest computer network to intimidate Rosaline Dixon.
I mean, I can hitch horses. I made bread every day for years when my kids were little. I made all the clothes my daughters ever wore on a sewing machine, a treadle sewing machine. I span a lot of history here, and I'm not the only one. I mean, lots of people do. But if I could make I made a beautiful tweed jacket for my husband once. He needed it for an occasion. He didn't have a really neat one. It was after the war. He'd come home and all he had was his uniform. And I did it on the treadle. Well, if I can do that on a treadle sewing machine, I can certainly set up a web page on a computer.
While most individual internet users simply purchase their connection from a local service provider, Mrs. Dixon has gone one better, getting access for no charge at all by joining the Ottawa Carleton Freenet.
It draws you into things. You don't just sort of sit at your little typewriter. You find out about things, and you go to things that you never would know about. You could read them in the paper, but there's something very real about discussing them. Somebody says, there's a tulip festival going on, and we're selling Dutch cookies down on the mall, and then someone else writes in and says, oh, are they really Dutch? You know, and then someone writes back and says, well, what would you think? Well, how do you make them? Well, here's what we make them. And the first thing you know, they're having a discussion, and then someone else jumps in. It's like having a conference with a lot of people. Then you go out to talk about them and to do something about it. So it does draw you into the community. It works.
The Freenet is the ultimate reflection of internet culture, available for free or for a voluntary contribution to anyone who wishes to use it. Freenet relies on the community for its existence, and the community around here, at least, appears to be putting it to good use.
You know, the greatest discussion we're having on this is one of the ladies, her name is Doris Johnston. She's organizing a cruise, and it's an imaginary cruise. We'll never go on it. We keep changing what kind of a ship we're going to use for that matter. And she's got everybody lined up. Everybody's got a job they're going to do, and each person, there's going to be a purser, there's going to be a captain, and every time some new member comes to the group, she chats with them and says, what do you want to do? And, you know, I've told them what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit in a deck chair on the deck, drinking Bovril, getting up occasionally to have a sedate game of shuffleboard on deck, because, you know, before there were jets, and when we went to Europe, this is what we did. And that's my style.
From her computer in Ottawa, there is now no limit to where Rosaline Dixon can go. She's been to the Louvre, she's been to the White House, she's toured Ireland and checked out the Paris Metro. She's read the electronic pages of Time magazine and the British Daily Telegraph. And she's prepared a list of every store in her hometown that gives a discount for seniors. Everyone has their own favorite site on the web, even its creator, Tim Berners-Lee.
There is something which I'm fond of because it was perhaps the earliest thing which really showed what a beautiful job you could do, and that was the Vatican.
But not all sites have Michelangelo.
Hello, Internet Shopping Network. This is Penny.
The Internet Shopping Network is open to the world 7 days a week. It ignores all international time zones. It never closes. Their corporate objective here, while not exactly humble, is deceptively simple. They're out to build the world's largest shopping mall. And they want to do it without putting up a single checkout counter or a parking lot. This revolutionary shopping mall will exist only on the World Wide Web, where ISN's co-founder, Bill Rawlinson, expects their business to grow like no other.
I would say probably maybe in the 2 to 5 year period, we might have 1 million products, let's say, in our database that you as a customer can go through. And our challenge is to make it very easy for you to go through that number of products, find the things that you want at the right price, and order them, easily. And again, I think if we can save you time and save you money and make it an enjoyable, entertaining experience while you're doing that, then we've accomplished our goals.
At last count, they were attracting something like 300,000 hits a day here, which they translate to about 15,000 people clicking up and down the aisles of cyberspace, checking out the inventory with their mouse, ordering flowers for Mother's Day, or just looking for a good deal on a second-hand car.
They click on lot. They come to a lot page where they see pretty much the items that will be up for bid in that lot.
And we've done the animations for the stuff too, right? So,
yeah.
Okay.
So we have fruits and vegetables in one market, and then within the markets we want to do aisles. So it's like a grocery store.
Cyber shopping could become big business. In fact, the Internet Shopping Network has already been taken over by the Home Shopping Network, not a group known for frivolous investments. What the Home Shopping Network has done for television, the ISN wants to do for the web.
If you're in the artichoke page, and there happens to be an artichoke recipe, that you go to that.
Well, that's what you go back and forth if you're in the recipe. You should be linking to all the ingredients in the recipe.
Yeah.
We had to add some value, that we had to do something that was unique, that you could only do on the net or would be very difficult to do in other mediums. And what we did early on was we tied editorial material to our products. So we went to InfoWorld magazine, who publishes information on computer technology products, and said, let us put your information up there. We're going to give it out to our customers for free to help them buy products. And we tied the stuff together. So that not only attracted people, and it was kind of in the spirit of the internet, because we were giving out information for free. We weren't charging anyone for that, in the hopes that if we did have good merchandise priced at a good price, people would buy from us. And it worked.
So what does Tim Berners-Lee get out of all this? Not a penny. While others are making fortunes using the World Wide Web, Berners-Lee put the concept out on the internet for anyone to use, free of charge.
I think that if initially I would had patented the idea and licensed it, it probably would have been just another of those products which you've seen, which have come and gone, and people didn't pick up, because it was the fact that it was available for free and very open initially, and the fact that the standards were completely open was very important. It meant people would trust it, they would put resources into it, because they knew that I wasn't going to turn on the licensing suddenly and start taking money from it. Yes, it would be very nice if every time somebody bought a web client, I got $1. I do think that from time to time, I must admit.
If Tim Berners-Lee did make $1 every time someone visited a website, he could have earned something like $13 million every day this month.
We've proven that the World Wide Web can draw a lot of people. Now we have to make some money at it.
Richard Pitt at Whimsy is convinced that today's World Wide Web is a modern gold rush, and that fortunes can be made by prospecting and developing commercial websites. So he's gathered together some of the local web architects to establish the ground rules for building sites on the Whimsy system. They're moving now from simply providing the connections to actually producing the content. Pitt believes that before too long, corporate websites will become as commonplace as a listing in the phone book.
It's a fascinating business to be in. It's not often that you get the opportunity to get in on the ground floor, so to speak, in what is essentially a brand new medium. We have print, radio, and television, and now we have the internet, and more specifically the World Wide Web and what it is evolving into, which is interactive audio, video, text facility that is both equal to and more than any of the other media.
640, 480, and a 14.4 modem. That's always been the standard.
The web architects sitting around the table here at Whimsy, like others all over the world, are the kind of people you'd usually have to hire if you wanted to have your own website. They understand the hypertext markup language, the HTML, which you need to create your pages.
Messy, it's like my desk, it's got stuff all over.
But Berners-Lee's original concept came with the ability to write hypertext already in place. There was no need for a middleman. Anyone could build a page and then collect other links by simply pointing and clicking, turning the web into a revolutionary word processor.
And when I type new things, then
Berners-Lee still uses his original browser editor.
We were browsing around earlier and we found the Petrie family's homepage. That's interesting. I want to make a note of that. So I hit a hotkey, and then, for example, the Petrie family. And I select the words. I hit another hotkey, and we've made a link from here to here. So behind those words, the machine has stored the address of this document. But you notice that you don't see the address of the document. At the top, we just see, here it says the Petrie family homepage in the window bar, which is the title of that document. And here it says Tim's homepage, which is the title of this document. I don't see any of the way the thing is stored or sent over the network. I don't see the addresses. But now I can save this document back, close that, and anytime I come back to my homepage, I click on that link, then the browser will pick up the Petrie family homepage and reload it. So I've made a connection.
Berners-Lee had made his concept of a combined browser editor available to anyone who was interested in developing it. But the people who started working on the browser component simply never got around to the editor. Somehow it slipped through the technological cracks.
When they got to the stage that they'd made a browser, the browser became so widely used. They got such a lot of attention, such a lot of mail, such a lot of feedback, so many demands, could they possibly make it do this? But they were completely flooded. And each of these people I said, yes, but please go ahead and make it an editor. This is what I would like it to do. I would like it to be one hotkey to make a link, one hotkey to do this. And their response was all, yes, but that's a bit complicated for me to do right now. I don't think I'll be able to do it this week. And they never got around to it. But now there are a few, I've seen some beta tests of some people who have sat down and written an editor, not released a product. And so I hope that over the next 12 months we'll see these come out and everybody will be able to do this. Now I've been predicting that this will happen within 12 months ever since the project began, but I'm still doing it.
As the internet grows, the technology just keeps growing with it, sometimes leading it, sometimes rushing after it. What's getting a lot of attention now is the ability to send pictures and sound through various new techniques. One of them is called the M-bone.
All right, what the M-bone is about, it's the slang for multicast backbone. Most stuff on the internet, of course, is unicast, meaning that you make a connection from one computer directly to another computer, and it's just, computer to computer type of stuff. But what the M-bone's about is multicasting, which means one computer transmits and any number can receive. And what the M-bone's about is it's a backbone, it's sort of part of the internet backbone that carries multicast traffic that's intended for multiple recipients. Now, part of the trick about using the M-bone is finding what's out there and in essence tuning into it. Because unlike a direct connection where somebody connects to your computer, this is like put out onto the ether and you have to tune into it.
The pending business is a resolution to be considered by the Senator of New York. With our time, I believe
The net is already capable of transmitting sound and pictures, but the quality is still shaky. When the M-bone is refined and expanded, it will let anyone who is on it create and program the equivalent of their own individual television channels.
Turns out anyone who has the right equipment can transmit. We could create a channel right now. I can go in here, create a channel, turn this mic on, I can actually send video. This is on audio only multicast, but you can do video as well, and send it out. Now I can control whether it goes out just to MIT, which we do actually fairly frequently. MIT events, we'll pull off the MIT cable, and we can send out to MIT, or I can say the whole world. And then anybody, on the planet. In fact, we did the iguana channel. We had a real camera, not one of these small little guys, pointed at the iguana, in focus, and we did it for 24 hours. And people would join in. We actually could see. We had an audio channel just so we can see who joins the audio, to see who's actually there. And people were commenting. We actually had a shared whiteboard.
The M-bone could change the way we look at the internet and eventually the way we look at television. Whether it's a channel filled with the thrills and excitement of MIT's Iggy the Iguana, or the peace and tranquility of that ultimate garage band, Severe Tire Damage. Their drummer, Mark Weiser, does have a day job. He helps define the future of the Internet.
The Internet right now is totally incapable of handling what's coming. It will need to grow 1,000,000-fold. What's coming is really 5 billion channels. Right now, sometimes people talk about 100 channels, or 300 channels, or maybe 1,000 channels. But there's going to be a channel for every person. I'm going to tune into my mother's channel on Saturday night, and she and a few other friends will talk together. The World Wide Web is really about everyone broadcasting to everyone else information, and that will include video and audio and other sources of sound.
Mark Weiser leads the research into ubiquitous computing at the famed Xerox PARC facility in Palo Alto, California. This is where the groundwork was done for some of the most adventurous advances in computers as we know them. The concept behind Apple was nurtured here, as was Windows and the mouse. At one time or another, the top computer brains in the world populate Xerox PARC.
Hi, Roy.
Weiser was one of the few computer scientists who does not have an undergraduate degree. Dr. Weiser went straight to the PhD program.
Can I try it? See if it's I'm in the loader.
Now he's helping invent the next generation of computers, ubiquitous computers which will bring the internet everywhere. Make it as invisible and as ordinary as electricity is now. And we won't just have one internet computer, we'll have about 50 of them. This one, you'll just slip in your pocket to check your email whenever you feel like it.
The 50 computers that we'll have in the future in our lives will be simpler because they will just do one thing well. There'll be one for taking notes, and one for telling us the weather, and one for the kids' homework, and a few that you stick on the refrigerator with the notes home from the teachers. Always up to date with the latest notes from the latest problem of the day. I like to call these computers of the future sometimes scrap computers, like scrap paper. Lots around. You open the drawer and pull out a few more computers when you need them. You pick up a 6-pack of computers on the way home from work. We probably won't call the computers. We may call them paper. But paper will mean an electronic display connected on the network onto the internet that's showing us what we need to know. So this is the biggest piece of ubiquitous computing, the live board. The key point about this is it achieves invisibility as a computer. So the instructions for using this device is, it's a chalkboard, here's the chalk, walk up and write. And out comes the data. So we can change colors. So it's kind of a really nice chalk. And you can go to new pages. And but you don't have to be a computer user to know how to use this. You know how to use this if you know how to scribble. Now, of course, it really is a computer. So one of the things that can happen on here is we can get to the whole World Wide Web. So here we are at the White House. And also from here, you can get to the page about severe tire damage. So here's the severe tire damage logo. So it's both a chalkboard, a magic chalkboard that you can store things away and also use to connect to other people. And it's a full internet access port. You sit back, and instead of watching TV, you watch the internet together and find interesting things.
It is Weiser's belief that the way we now deal with computers will soon be considered simply quaint, primitive. For we are, he reminds us, still in the very early stages of computer development.
I think in a few decades we'll look back at this period of time and it will be just a little blip in the history of computers. Oh, that funny time in the 90s when everyone thought computers ought to be noisy and faster and ought to have lots of 3D graphics on them. And we'll laugh about that time. Electricity went through a time like computers are going through now. In the 1890s and the early 1900s, there were electric ties, electric bow ties, there were electric underwear, there were electric cures for every different kind of disease. Electricity could do everything, and it was exciting to be electric. So everything was electrified, whether it made sense or not, electric goldfish. And computers are currently going through that sort of fad in which the computer itself is important. But it is a fad. Of course, the computer isn't what's important. What's important is other people, is information, and is individual lives and what people want to do. So this time will pass.
How this time will pass and how the World Wide Web develops are among the questions that have brought Tim Berners-Lee from the Particle Physics Lab in Geneva to MIT, where he now runs something called the World Wide Web Consortium. It's this group that will set the global standards for the way the web will evolve.
It's great that anybody can put information on the web, that the threshold before you can express yourself has dropped. It's still not as low as I'd like it to be. Anybody who reads the web ought to be able to write something on the web. And pretty soon I think that'll happen because it's going to be so much fun for everybody to be able to write hypertext that I think the online dial-up service providers are going to be giving you a certain amount of disk space as you when you get your connectivity. Of course, when everybody is producing things, as with paper, there's going to be so much rubbish out there, so much junk. And so there will still be the need, there is already people who review, people who produce lists of recommended reading, of collections of information which they recommend, which seem to be stable, which seem to be produced by reputable institutes, of academic papers which have been reviewed, for example, of commerces which are reliable, where you would actually buy something from and expect to get a guarantee. And you're going to need that. We're going to need all these structures to be able to distinguish the wheat from the chaff. But the chaff is also useful.
There will be more wheat on the web and there will be more chaff. The difference now is that defining which is solely in the hands of the individual user.
I've heard in some more academic circles, oh, what's the point of this? It's just, it's a lot of junk coming up on the internet. And to some extent, perhaps someone might feel that way, but to me, it's not. It's a comfort zone. It's a starting point. And I think people need that. They need to feel that it's not an intimidating world out there, that you can start very small and let your interests take you. And they will take you. It'll be amazing.
It's still too early in the game to have truly grasped what the Internet and the World Wide Web have unleashed, for we now have the potential to communicate not just with our neighbours or within our communities, but with the entire human race, planet-wide, not government to government or business to business, but person to person to person, no individual or corporation or state having less or more access than anyone else, and the appetite for gaining that access continues to be insatiable and constantly accelerating. The World Wide Web traffic now exceeds the equivalent of the collected works of Shakespeare, not every hour, not every minute, but every second. In the time it's taken to watch this show, another 5,952 people have started using the Internet. If you're one of them and have access to the World Wide Web, we've prepared a site about the information contained in this show. This is the Universal Resource Locator, the URL, our address. You can reach it from anywhere in the world. Good luck.
If I look back and wish that I'd done something differently, that I would have liked to make the URLs a little cleaner. To have dots and slashes and the same thing is a bit of a mess.
We don't know 5 years from now what people will use the network for. Will the network be here? Yes. How will people use it? Will they use the World Wide Web? Yeah, it'll still be there, just like we still use the same programs we used 15 years ago. But what will be the craze? Who knows? What we do know is as we add capabilities, as we add capacity, it will be used.